everyone, welcome back to Actual English. I'm Jennifer Clyde. It's time for lesson 191 and today's topic is USB sticks as we call them. A flash drive or a USB stick is a storage device, a plastic storage device that we usually use to transfer data, store data, and also carry around with us. They may come in all different shapes and sizes. But one thing for us all to keep in mind is, although we will be hearing about it towards the end of our lesson today in today's actual story. Now, often we do hear people saying USB, for example. Do you have a USB? Do you have a USB that I can borrow? In many cases, if you say that to a foreigner, they may wonder what you are talking about. Because they may think, okay, is he or she asking about a USB connection? A USB port, and so on and so forth. So you need to be very clear when you say, do you have a USB, especially to a foreigner, okay? So they are much smaller and faster compared to other storage devices such as floppy disks or even CDs. And they are much more durable and they have a larger capacity for data storage. So today let's talk about USB sticks or flash drives. Here we go with actual talk.
Well, Michelle, do you remember back in the old days when we had to cart around floppy disks?
So my floppy disk was these smaller square
No, I'm
ones.
talking about these really, really big ones.
I don't remember those, but I do remember the smaller ones. But that was when I was in elementary school, I think.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed how technology has moved on now. And instead of carting around these silly big plastic, blocks of, I don't know what they are, now we can just take around a small USB stick.
Yeah, and I think it's so amazing because I was reading the other day that they're planning on making USBs that can hold up to 2 terabytes worth of information.
So a terabyte, that's a huge amount of information compared, or data capacity compared to the old days, isn't it?
So I know that computers, you have a certain amount of gigs, maybe 120 gigs,
Right.
but then terabyte is a lot more than that. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, sort of 1,000, who knows?
Right,
But
so
pretty
it's huge.
massive.
Yeah, but then it's interesting because you have this vast amount of information or storage capacity on this tiny, tiny little stick of just, I don't know what it's made of, plastic, but
Well, I mean, for me, just it's sort of acted as a lifesaver on many, many occasions.
Right.
Because I really need to access some data quickly, and I've just had a USB, or someone else around me has a USB that they can just give to me.
Yeah, so it's really easy to share information.
Yeah.
And I know even for school, when I had to work on presentations and papers, that it definitely saved my life.
Well, I saw you were carrying around the other day some really pretty looking thing on your keychain.
Yeah, so that was actually my USB. It's in a shape of, just one of those cute little characters, like a bear. And I was actually at the store, and they have all these vast amounts, like different shapes and foods. So it was really interesting.
Well, I'll tell you what, I want to impress my friends, and that just looked really cool. So can you take me to that shop, and I'd like to buy one?
Definitely, I'll take you tomorrow.
Oh, cheers.
Eugene and Michelle were talking about floppy disks, also known as diskettes or just floppies that we all used to use a long time ago. I remember when I was in middle school, or maybe elementary or middle school, I think it was middle school, we used many, many floppy disks to save things or store things on the flexible plastic disk. But now we do have other devices to store information and data on. So today we're talking about USB sticks, right? So they're comparing USB sticks that people use these days to the floppy disks or the diskettes that we used to use a long, long time ago. How they're a lot smaller, more durable perhaps, and has a larger capacity for data storage. Let's take a look at the conversation. Now, Eugene says, Michelle, do you remember? So he's asking if she remembers something from the past. Back in the old days. Back in. Which basically refers to a time a long time ago. Okay, back in the old days, a long, long time ago, when we had to cart around floppy disks. Okay, So let's take a look at a pattern or an idiomatic expression and also floppy. Okay, he said floppy disks. But for example, a floppy disk, as I did mention earlier, it's just another word for a diskette. It's also just called a floppy, simply put. You may ask, hey, do you have a floppy? Meaning, do you have a floppy disk? And he said, do you remember a time when we had to carry around or cart around? You may be more familiar with the expression carry around, which means to have something with you, whether it's in your pocket or your bag or purse. If you have it with you at all times, you can say you carry something with you. Cart around means the same thing. It can also mean to put something in an actual cart or a container and take it to a certain place. But cart around also means to carry around. So he's asking once again, do you remember back in the old days, a long, long time ago, when we had to cart around floppy disks? She says, my floppy disks were these small, square ones. Okay? So they were very small and they were in the shape of a square. And he says, no, 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 that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these really, really big ones. So he stresses really twice, okay? That's just a way of exaggerating or stressing something. He's not simply saying it's really big. He's saying it's really, really big, meaning it's very big, okay? All right, here we go. She says, I don't remember those, but I do remember the smaller ones, okay? But that was when I was in elementary school, okay? You can see I was in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, in college, for example. So here, up till this point, they're talking about floppy disks that they both used many, many years ago. Back in the old days, perhaps when they were in elementary school, okay? Now, Eugene says, yeah, it was a long time ago, and I'm amazed how technology has moved on now. Let's take a look at move on. Okay, move means to, of course, as we know, move from one place to another. We're talking about making an action. But move on, in this case, could mean to advance. So he's talking about how it's surprising or how it's amazing how technology has moved on, advanced. Instead of carting around these silly big plastic blocks of, and he says, I don't know what they are, now we can just take around a small USB stick. Here we go, that's our topic for today. So even Eugene said USB stick, okay? He's being very clear about what he is talking about. Now here he's used cart around and take around, means to carry around once again. So he says, yeah, technology has advanced so much and it's surprising, it's amazing. Nowadays, we don't have to carry around these silly big plastic blocks of whatever it is. And he says, now we have, something we call a USB stick, which are a lot smaller. She says, yeah, I think it's so amazing because, why? I was reading the other day that they're planning on making USBs that can hold up to 2 terabytes worth of information. So here she's talking about data capacity or storage capacity. So here she says they're able to hold up to. Hold up to basically means to be able to store up to a certain amount, a certain degree, a certain number of something. It means to be able to contain, to hold, to store. Now, up to 2 terabytes. Terabytes can be written as TB, as you may all know, or even just T and then byte. That's usually how it's written. Now, roughly or loosely, it's 1 trillion bytes. That is a really huge number, isn't it? Anyhow, she's saying that these small storage devices can hold up to, they can store up to, okay? Up to how much? 2 terabytes worth of information. Now, Eugene says that's a huge amount of information compared to, he's comparing the two, compared to the old data capacity. Okay, isn't it? And he says pretty massive, right? So capacity, we're talking about the amount of something that can be stored. Storage capacity. Okay, let's move on. Right, so it's huge. It's interesting because you have this vast amount of information or storage capacity on this tiny, tiny little stick of plastic. Vast is what? Vast is just another word for great, huge, okay, limitless. So she's saying you can store a vast amount of information where? On this tiny little stick of plastic. Of course, she's talking about the USB sticks, all right? And then Eugene says, for me, it sort of acted as a lifesaver on many, many occasions because I really needed to access some data quickly. So he's talking about certain situations that he was in, okay? Difficult situations where he needed data or access to some data very quickly. But what happened? He was able to make use of the USB stick. And he's saying that the USB stick, for him, acted as a lifesaver. A lifesaver can be a thing or a person that saves you from a very difficult situation or even an urgent situation. We're not talking about, well, I guess it can be an accident, for example, or just a difficult situation that you're in and something or someone just saves you from going through that difficulty or experiencing that difficulty, then he or she or a thing can be a lifesaver, okay? So simply put, he's saying that a USB stick really, really helped him out in a difficult situation, especially when he had to access some data very quickly. Moving on, she says, it's really easy to share information, sure. And even for school, when I have to work on presentations and papers, she says, it definitely saved my life. Which means that it saved her from going through or experiencing difficulty. But here, she says, well, when she had to work on presentations, it was very helpful. And also when she had to write a paper or papers. You may already know what she means by papers in this situation. We're talking about what people often call reports. In school, we often have to write a paper or papers. It's like a research, as we call it, reports. Rarely do we call them reports in the US, and I'm probably sure that they don't call it reports in the UK either. It's commonly called reports in Korea, but when you have to write something, we're talking about a printed document or a written document, which is called a paper or papers. All right, and then Eugene says, I saw you were carrying around the other day some really pretty looking thing on your keychain, okay? Of course, he's talking about her USB stick, and she says, yeah, that was actually my USB. It's in the shape of one of those cute little characters like a bear. So she's saying that her USB stick is in the shape of a bear. It's in the shape of a cute character. If you see that something is in the shape of something, you are saying that it is designed to be a certain shape, okay? It is made in a certain shape. Okay, we'll be practicing this pattern later on. And then she says, I was at the store and they have them in all different shapes. In all different shapes, meaning in many, many different shapes. And then Eugene finally says, well, I tell you what. I want to impress. I want to impress my friends. Perhaps he wants to make his friends kind of jealous. And he says, and that does look really cool. So, can you take me to that shop? I'd like to buy one. And she says, definitely, I'll take you tomorrow. And of course, Eugene finally, he ends the conversation by saying cheers. Now we often, when we make a toast, when we're congratulating someone or celebrating a very special event, we often lift our drinks or glasses and we say toast or cheers, right? But in this case, cheers, it's just a way of expressing one's enthusiasm, for example, or approval. So you're shouting out for someone, saying, yes, I will. That sounds good. I approve. Okay? So that's where he says, oh, cheers, meaning, yeah, let's do it. Okay, that is all for today's actual talk conversation. Let's take a listen to it one more time.
Well, Michelle, do you remember back in the old days when we had to cart around floppy disks?
So my floppy disk was these smaller square
No, I'm
ones.
talking about these really, really big ones.
I don't remember those, but I do remember the smaller ones. But that was when I was in elementary school, I think.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed how technology has moved on now. And instead of carting around these silly big plastic, blocks of, I don't know what they are, now we can just take around a small USB stick.
Yeah, and I think it's so amazing because I was reading the other day that they're planning on making USBs that can hold up to 2 terabytes worth of information.
So a terabyte, that's a huge amount of information compared, or data
Right,
capacity compared
right.
to the old days, isn't it?
So I know like computers, you have a certain amount of gigs, maybe 120 gigs,
Right.
but then terabyte is a lot more than that. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, sort of 1,000, who knows?
Right,
But
so
pretty
it's huge.
massive, yeah.
But then it's interesting because you have this vast amount of information or storage capacity on this tiny, tiny little stick of just, I don't know what it's made of, plastic, but yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, just it's sort of acted as a lifesaver on many, many occasions.
Right.
Because I really need to access some data quickly, and I've just had a USB, or someone else around me has a USB that they can just give to me.
Yeah, so it's really easy to share information.
Yeah.
And I know even for school, when I had to work on presentations and papers, that it definitely saved my life.
Well, I saw you were carrying around the other day some really pretty looking thing on your keychain.
Yeah, so that was actually my USB. It's in a shape of, just one of those cute little characters, like a bear. And I was actually at the store, and they have all these vast amounts, like different shapes and foods. So it was really interesting.
Well, I'll tell you what, I want to impress my friends, and that just looked really cool. So can you take me to that shop, and I'd like to buy one?
Definitely, I'll take you tomorrow.
Oh, cheers.
All right, now it's time for us to take you to actual expressions. Let's take a look at some vocab words and then move on to today's patterns and practice them together with some sample sentences. First of all, we have floppy. Of course, we're talking about USB sticks, but a floppy or a floppy disk was what we used to use a long, long time ago. I guess people can use it still till this day, but notice there's a noun form and the adjective form. Now, when you say floppy in the noun form, you may be talking about a floppy disk, such as a floppy disk or a diskette. But also, if you say that something is floppy, it means that it is flexible, okay? So flexible, and then disk. So it's also called a flexible disk, a diskette, or a floppy disk. These are all in the noun form, all right? And then capacity is basically the maximum amount or number of a thing that can be stored or contained. So capacity, the stress goes on the second syllable, and some synonyms are volume, space, and size. But keep in mind, we're talking about the maximum degree or maximum volume, maximum space, or maximum size that can be stored or contained. And then vast means just very extreme or very great, okay, to a great extent, for example. Some synonyms are measureless, endless, or even unlimited. It's a great number, a great amount, a great size, a great degree, for example. It means super, super great. Let's move on to today's patterns then. Cart around, cart away, or even cart off. They all mean to carry around, okay? Take around is another way of putting it, but also if you say cart something away, it can mean to put something in a container such as a cart and then take something away, okay? Let's take a look at some sample sentences. We've got 2 for you. The first one is, what are a few things you always cart around or cart around with you? In this case, we're saying, what are a few things you always carry around with you? Okay, let's check out one more sample sentence, meaning to cart away, to take something out, to put in a container or a cart and to take away. It's my dad's job to cart away the garbage at home. So he carts away the garbage at home, meaning he takes the garbage out. Okay? My dad takes the garbage out. It's his job to take the garbage out or to cart away the garbage at home. Moving on to our next pattern, hold up to. So we're talking about how much something can contain or store, okay? If you say up to a certain number or up to a certain amount, you're saying that max. That is the max level or max number of something it can contain or store. The car seat can hold up to 10 kilograms. So this means for those of you that have children, you may have a car seat for your kids to set in the back seat, and they come in all different sizes. And these car seats can hold up to certain kilograms. So the one that you have, you can say, my car seat or the car seat I have can hold up to 10 kilograms, can hold up to 15 kilograms, for example. Okay, so let's move on to our next one. Our final pattern for today is be in the shape of something. Simply put, it means to be designed in a certain shape, okay? To be made in a certain shape. So here is a sample sentence. My USB stick is in the shape of a little robot. That's my USB stick. It's got crystals on it. It's very bling bling, as we say. It's a small robot. It's black with some crystals on it. Well, my USB stick is in the shape of a little robot. Okay, that is all for today's actual expressions, everyone. Practice them more on your own.
USB stands for Universal Serial Bus. It's basically the connection mechanism used to connect all these external devices to your computer. And nowadays, even TVs have a USB port and Xboxes have a USB port. I was a little surprised when I came to Korea because it's used a little bit differently, a form of Konglish, if you will. A USB is, in English, we mean to say a memory stick or a USB flash drive. But in Korea, it was just, do you have a USB? What? Because you have to say something else. It's, do you have a USB connection, a USB wire, USB port, something. But you can't just say, do you have a USB? It sort of doesn't make sense. So when you are talking about USB, make sure you know what kind of USB we're talking about. Is it the connection? Is it the link? What is it?
Did you fully understand what Alex was trying to say? As I did mention in the beginning of today's lesson, I did say that a lot of people tend to say USB or USBs in Korea. It's quite common, but usually if you're talking to a foreigner, they may wonder what you mean by a USB. Just as Alex said, it's basically the connection mechanism used to connect all external devices to your computer, for example. Not only computers, but even TVs and certain devices may have USB ports, for example, USB connectors. So let's check out what he's mentioned about USB ports, USB connectors, and even USB sticks or flash drives. Here we go. Nowadays, even TVs have a USB port. And Xboxes have a USB port. This is the part where we actually stick in the USB stick, for example, the flash drive. So televisions, even Xboxes, your computer, all have USB ports, okay? You see what we're talking about, right? And then moving on to, in English, we mean to say a memory stick or a USB flash drive, or a USB stick as well. So these are some ways that a USB can be called. These are a few of the correct ways to call them to make it clear. So you can call them a memory stick or a USB flash drive. But in Korea, it was just, do you have a USB? He's talking about the questions he was asked. He would often hear people asking him or others, do you have a USB? And he did say that he was wondering, okay, what exactly is he or she talking about, right? Moving on. You have to say, he says, that's not what you should say. You have to say what? Do you have a USB connection? A USB wire? A USB port? A USB something? Meaning something has to follow USB. Something needs to come after USB, such as a connection or a connection, wire, port, or whatever it is. You have to say USB something, he says. And then, here we go. Oh, that's about it. And then towards the end of his actual story response, he did mention you cannot just say, do you have a USB? Why? Because if you do say that, it really doesn't make sense, and people may be confused about what you are asking for. Okay? Hopefully now you know what to say the next time you need a USB, whatever. Remember to add something after USB. All right, good job. Let's take a listen one more time.
USB stands for Universal Serial Bus. It's basically the connection mechanism used to connect all these external devices to your computer. And nowadays, even TVs have a USB port and Xboxes have a USB port. I was a little surprised when I came to Korea because it's used a little bit differently, a form of Konglish, if you will. A USB is, in English, we mean to say a memory stick or a USB flash drive. But in Korea, it was just, do you have a USB? What? Because you have to say something else. It's, do you have a USB connection, a USB wire, USB port, something. But you can't just say, do you have a USB? It sort of doesn't make sense. So when you are talking about USB, make sure you know what kind of USB we're talking about. Is it the connection? Is it the link? What is it?
Today we talked about USB sticks, that's right. Also called memory sticks or USB flash drives. You can call them all different things, but once again, as Alex even mentioned, you need to know exactly what you are talking about to make it clear, okay? Is it the connection or is it the link? What exactly is it that you are talking about or asking for? So keep that in mind, everyone. I hope you learned a lot through today's lesson, and hopefully you'll be able to use the patterns, the expressions, and the vocab words we learned today in your next conversation with someone about USB sticks or memory sticks or USB flash drives. Now, next time let's talk about another computer-related topic, hardware and software. Let's talk about how you can talk about these two things, how different they are. Okay, that's to come next time. In the meantime, what you can do is come to our homepage, everyone. Come on over to www.ebse.co.kr and look for Actual English with Jennifer. Come by to post up your messages and comments. That is all for today. I'll catch you again next time. Until then, take care and bye for now.